blusters. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll kick it off here. Is that loud enough?
Is it loud enough? Guys, you can tell us.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so I'm Paddy McNichol from the Loughshore and part of the Save Lough campaign. I first of all want to just thank each and every one of you for coming out here on a bank holiday Monday, on this sunny bank holiday Monday, to the scene of this ongoing crime. Green waves wash dead animals onto our shores, and you can see the green waves there, although the wind has blown the algae out of our way, but you can see just how green this loch is. We're meant to be eating ice creams here, looking out at a shimmering blue shore, but instead we get green sludge. A toxic stench has affected even more of the shore this year, and the algae season isn't even over. For decades, our government and the management bodies of the loch have put profit and industrial growth above our health and environment. And despite all the bluster, they have failed to even fight the issue that they themselves created. It is an absolute shame. The same politicians who greenlit relentless sand dredging and fully backed the going for growth intensive agriculture scheme are saying they're now going to save the loch. We know their track records. The government created this mess. And we're not convinced by their empty promises. It was our government who incentivized the agricultural industry to rapidly intensify agriculture for profit. It was our government that enacted decades of cuts to NI water, leaving us with a water service that can't even handle the amount of sewage flowing in and out of our waterways. Our environment, our drinking water and future cannot be trusted in the hands of politicians who have given subsidies to billionaire corporations like Moy Park, who are part of the problem and polluters of this loch. So, well, also a shout out to the absentee landlord, the Earl of Shaftesbury. We always have to shout him out at every one of these protests. It is an absolute disgrace that the Earl of Shaftesbury is still making money from every ton of sand dredged in our already, decrepit loch, and nothing is being done about it. Even worse, he's trying to portray himself as an environmentalist these days. But it's not all doom and gloom. The crowd here today shows that there is a sea change, and this is a sea change we're going to keep pushing and keep going over the next weeks and months. We still turn up on families and our kids and pets. We still turn up to our Loughshore despite the health risks. And why is that? Is this the future that we deserve? Is this how things have to be? Is this the new normal? I don't think it has to be. In fact, it shouldn't be. This should be a turning point for our politicians to say and to look at themselves, and especially before the next election, realize if we do not see a sea change in the priorities of our environment, our livelihoods, our futures, above corporate profits, above cuts, and above the lobbies that have their pockets, then they're not going to get our votes. It's as simple as that. So, today we are calling for an environmental revolution. And around the Loughshore over the coming weeks and months, we will be rallying, and there will be a large march, hopefully a large march, across the Loughshore come the end of September. When you hear more details than that, please follow our socials, Save Lough for more details, and other speakers will touch on some of these upcoming events in a moment. So I just want to go over our 5 key demands. Hopefully a lot of you have got a leaflet with some of these demands in more detail. So, number 1, we demand the creation of an independent environmental agency with real power to hold polluters accountable. We demand the end of private ownership of Lough Neagh. Number 3, we demand an urgent investment into a research and recovery plan and a just transition for those industries that do not work with the loch. We also demand an immediate end to commercial sand dredging, especially while our loch is in this horrible state that it's in. And we demand a massive reduction in both agricultural runoff and the sewage flowing into our loch. We demand a well-funded water service. And lastly, rights and nature status for Lough Neagh. Our loch has been treated horrifically for decades. This is not just something that's came about in the past few years. This is a result of an economic system that prioritizes growth and profit over the nature that we live in and we hope to live in for many, many years to come. So, I'm going to pass it off to our speakers here. And these speakers have been campaigning non-stop since 2023. And our politicians could take a bit of guidance, I think, or a little bit of inspiration from those campaigners who have been non-stop. And whenever Stormont goes in recess, we don't. So first of all, I'd very much like to welcome Mary O'Hagan for this first speech. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Tony. I'd like to say welcome to everybody that's come today. Thank you very, very much for turning out to support the Save Lough Neagh campaign. I'm just a normal person. I'm a mummy and a wife, and I'm a Lough Neagh swimmer, or I was before this happened. And I'm angry. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm angry, and you should be angry too, because this is not just now. This is not just happening now. This is what we are going to face for decades to come. Decades, if we do not turn this around, if our government does not turn this around. We have corporations like Moy Park polluting all the time, billion-dollar profits, fines, what are they? No big deal. We have a massive 20% of polluters that are probably putting in about 80% of the pollution into this loch. That's who we need to be targeting. We also have multiple quangos around this loch that are profiting off the loch, but doing absolutely nothing for it. And I'm going to call out Lough Neagh Partnership here today, and I don't care what they say or what they think about it. Lough Neagh Partnership has been guardians of this loch, so they say, for how many years now? 30 odd years? And what have they done? A lot of vanity projects around the loch, and when you go back in 2 years' time, everything's lying in disarray. But yet, they're the ones that the government are listening to. Do you think that's right? No. Lough Neagh Partnership last year spent public money on surveilling me online and 5 other people to watch what I was saying, to watch what I was doing, and then they sent slap litigation to 6 of us to silence us, and that's what it was for. So that's who your Lough Neagh Partnership is, the people who are self-appointed guardians of the loch. We have our fabulous Minister, Dara Minister, Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. And I do say to Andrew Muir, please, you should become the Minister for the Department for Environment, Agriculture and Rural Affairs. Put the environment first for once. The Lough Neagh Action Plan does not go anywhere near far enough. And even we have it there, sure what's happening? Nothing's happening with it. There's still 22 points, apparently, that have yet to be implemented. And with the blockage of Sinn Féin and DUP ministers, that's never going to happen. And you see us as private citizens, what we have is our vote and our voices. That's the only way we can affect change, our vote and our voices. So I'm urging you here today to use your voices and use your vote wisely. Don't keep voting in green and orange politics in this country, because that's what has got us into this state. All right, I'm going to pass on now to our next speaker, or are you coming in, Paddy?
Thank you, Mary. So Mary's a swimmer who's been affected deeply by this crisis, and next we have a fisherman who's been deeply affected by this crisis and been campaigning with us since the start. Declan Coney, I would like to welcome you to the stage. Thanks, Declan.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming out today. I'd love to thank Save Lough Neagh for chairing this and setting it up. But I'm going to call a spade a spade. It's very disheartening when I look around here at the numbers today. It's the same numbers that were here last year. We are seeing constantly on television, that we're seeing social media, the amount of people that are concerned about the Lough. But where are they all at today? You know, they've had ample time to come here today. I've left from Monaghan this morning at 5 o'clock to come here today. And it's so disheartening. My background, I'm back with Monaghan. My background at Lough is I was an eel fisherman. I haven't fished eels in maybe 12, 13 years. But I continue to scale fish, which is for perch and roach and trout and stuff like that. We stopped the trout because at the end of the day, the trout deserve to get up and down the river, simple as. And to commercial fish them, it's a disgrace. You know, we've lost the fly, practically lost the Lough fly. It's gone. And me personally, I know I don't like a call a spade a spade. To me, the Lough is dead. It is dead. But we're seeing the lungs is collapsing now. We're seeing the wildlife has taken so much of a stumble. You know, where is Lough Partnership today? Where is Sinn Féin? Where is the council? Where is all them? There's nobody that showed up here today. Not one of them. And the other thing that have been called out is the media. The media seem to have this single narrative that they back Lough Party. You know, every time there's something said about the Lough that comes to airtime, it's Mr. Darby, it's this person, it's that person of Lough Partnership. They're not the people of Lough. Myself and all the people around here, there's one, like I'm from Arbo and Moortown area, I see 3 people here, including myself from Arbo and Moortown. You know, I have had more arguments with my father over the years. Would you please walk away from the Lough? It's not that. I would love to be able to walk away from the Lough, but there's something inside here won't let it go. Something. And I have a serious passion for this Lough, and as long as I have a breath, I will fight for it. And it's very disheartening to see the numbers here today. You know, there's so much I could say. 5 minutes ain't enough. I could go on and on and on, but I forgot my notes. I appreciate every single person that has come here today. You know, I appreciate it deep down. It means a lot, and like, hopefully we'll have a bit of a meeting last night. We're going to organise a few things now in 2026. You know, the 40th anniversary will be coming up at the Lignite March. You know, Arbo Wood Cross, there's over 2,000 people turned up at a protest. Look at this today. That shows you the generation, the way things have changed. You know, in the Lough, I was at the battery on Saturday, and the smell of the battery was sickening, but there's still 27 camper vans sitting at it. And you're thinking to yourself, how did him God is sticking that smell and that mess? But I don't even, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what route to turn anymore. You know, I've got a Facebook page, I'm better at writing than I am talking, but it's just, we have to keep raising awareness. And all I can ask, you know, we have to ask, be honest, Andrew Moore, Environmental Minister, what has his background regarding environment and agriculture? It's none. So until then kind of changes to bring people in that are concerned, so deeply concerned, all we're hearing is talk, and no action. You know, the action needs to start not today or tomorrow, yesterday. It has to start. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Declan. So next we're going to hear a few words from Dr. Les going on. Sorry, Les. You seem to be being shot there. Thank you, Les.
Listening to Declan there really indicates to me, as a scientist and as a technologist, that there's another dimension. It's a spiritual dimension to this. If we improve the environment, it improves our spirit. And there's a mutual interaction between our spirit and the environment, and that improves the environment and we grow. The problem at the moment is that there seems to be an impasse. Everyone seems to be stuck and therefore depressed. But there are solutions. And there are precedents. For instance, in Loughshore, the pig units and the poultry units put phosphorus into the lake. It grew blue-green algae, the fishing, the best in Ireland, was killed almost instantaneously. And the government put their hand up and they said, mea culpa, sorry, we did that. And they put tankers in, tankered away all the slurry from those intensive operations over the hill into an area where the phosphorus was required for potatoes and for root crops, and the payment came from not importing phosphate, nitrate fertilizers. That's a solution, because from the algae's point of view, there is only one issue, and that is the availability of phosphorus in the water column. Right now, on a windy day, the water column is being enriched with 30 years of organic matter that has been deposited on the bottom of the lough. And in the next few days, you will see, if you think it was bad, a few days ago, you will see a much worse emerald green cake on the surface of Lough Neagh, caused by that wind and the historical phosphorus. So the answer to this problem, technically, is really simple. You remove phosphorus. The phosphorus isn't Catholic phosphorus, it's not Protestant phosphorus, it's not green phosphorus, it's not orange phosphorus, it's elemental phosphorus. And the solution is to remove the phosphorus. So all the politicians, all the sciences have now a simple test. Is the action that is planned, is the action that is taken immediately reducing the soluble reactive phosphorus in Lough Neagh? That's the test. So, money into satellites, does that remove the phosphorus going into Lough Neagh? No. Raising a new committee, does that do it? No. What you have to do is physically get hold of the phosphorus and take it out of Lough Neagh. That's the solution. Thank you.
Les. And just to add to Les's point, the ex-DUP minister cut the amount of fines for repeat polluters. That repeat polluters penalty has still not been reinstated. Like, it is absolutely shocking that the same ministers saying that our neighbours, our immigrant neighbours, are the problem, and yet they're backstabbing us and shooting down any sort of attempts to stop nutrients going into this lough. It's very clear that the Stormont executive have only one aim, and that is to distract and to divide. And we have to cut through this and keep this campaign going. And thank you. So I would very much like to welcome James Orr from Friends of the Earth NI to the stage. Thank you, James.
How's it going? It's an honour to be invited here today, Paddy. And thanks to Save Lough Neagh for keeping going. It's not very easy to keep going when there's so much grief and so much tragedy around. And fair play to you for being here today on a bank holiday, because I'm sure everybody's so many other things to do. I think I have a few notes here. I think it's probably all been said. I wish I'd thought about it's not Catholic phosphorus or Protestant phosphorus. To me, that's the line of the day. People have been telling me for years that if only we could get people around the table to solve Lough Neagh. You know, the industrial companies like Moy Park, the politicians, the political parties, all the big NGOs. If only we could get round the table, we could solve Lough Neagh. The evidence shows that they did get round the table, and when they do get round the table, they created the conditions for the ecological catastrophes at Lough. I think we have to be very sure that there is intent and there's an engineering of the truth that's taken place. When they get round the table, they established the going for growth strategy. They were warned that they were breaking the law many times. We predicted the algal blooms 10, 15 years later. They ploughed ahead anyway. This was engineered. This wasn't an accident. This is by design. The second thing they did when they got round the table, they gave immunity for Shaftesbury Estate from prosecution for the destruction of the lake bed. This is the bed that provides the habitat for the fish and the diving birds and everything else. And they provided immunity by allowing for 40 to 50 years unregulated, unassessed extraction from the lake bed. That didn't happen by accident. That happened by design. That was a deliberate policy of malfeasance by the government. The third thing that they've done that's just been identified as well is that they've created the solutions now that are false solutions, just as Les is saying, and they're peddling this illusion that they're actually engaged in any change where they're not. And today, when they sit round the table, the very same companies, the same politicians, they have two things in their mind. The first thing is, how can we protect our reputation? I know this, I know them, I know how they act. I've been studying them and analysing them in Lough and elsewhere for years. That's their first priority. How can we protect our reputations? The second thing is that they're asking the question, how can we give this illusion of change, but we're continuing the business as normal strategy, so that the Lough's priority, in their views, is to protect the polluters, not Lough itself. And I think there's a few problems that they don't want you to know, and if I could just spend a minute just outlining those. The first one is that the going for growth strategy hasn't changed, despite all the outcry, despite the international media attention 2 years ago. They now call it, do you know what they call it now? They don't call it going for growth, they call it green growth. Exactly the same strategy to protect the interests of the corporate polluters. The second thing they don't want you to know, and Les so eloquently described, the problem is SRP, soluble reactive phosphorus, is since the catastrophic blooms in 2023, phosphorus is, guess what, it's increasing. It's increasing on Lough Neagh. Now what on earth does that tell you about the pathology behind the mindset of these people? The third thing they don't want you to know is that Sean Accord, the journalist here, got information that there's a 2046 for another 21 years, irrevocable contract with the extractors at the bed of the Lough between the Earl of Shaftesbury. What that means, if we're talking about a future ownership model around the rights of nature or community ownership, to take it away from private ownership, and certainly we wouldn't trust state ownership, but a community ownership model, that the extractors and the Shaftesbury estate has got a veto on any negotiations. They don't want you to know that, and we need to get rid of that contract, and that needs to be the first thing on the agenda of these meetings, which it isn't. And as Les said as well, in January to February this year, Department for Infrastructure took a decision to further defund Northern Ireland Water at a time this year when they have the money to invest. They further defunded Northern Ireland Water from the disastrous sewage treatment infrastructure we've seen for years. But I think probably the biggest deception that they're engaged with at the minute is that they're saying that there's no money. It takes virtually no money to set up an environmental protection agency, some £1 million a year. You know, nothing significant that they don't have. It takes no money to hold the polluters to account. We have systems of governance, and we have a judicial system that can do that. It takes about £1 billion to start the reinvestment in Northern Ireland Water. Well, they have that because the A5 road project, which isn't going ahead, is £2 billion. So DFI can invest in Northern Ireland Water. And it also costs nothing for those people who are engaged in the destruction of Lough Neagh to come to the table in transparency and declare their conflicts of interest. And they don't want you to know that there is very little transparency around this decision making. So whilst the Northern Ireland Executive has become the political wing of the corporate polluters, they also don't want you to know that to the polluters and to the extractors in Lough, this place is worth more to them dead than alive. God forgive them. I'm trying to inject some positivity into this, and I do think that Lough will be the tipping point. I think that Lough will be the comeuppance of these people if we don't listen to her. And I think Lough is screaming at us to be on her side against the kleptocrats and the fight for her future. And finally, I think we're not going to be fooled by their attempts to extract even more irreplaceable wealth from Lough, from this new idea that they had, as if the commodification of Lough isn't enough, that we treat her as an object, we treat it as a thing, it's not a living being. They're now talking about biodiversity net gain. They're now talking about the Lough having carbon credits. Basically, the stock exchange is going to intervene and save Lough according to their financialisation agenda. And I think on top of all the other crackpot false solutions, it's absolutely essential that we don't financialise Lough even further, but approach the Lough on her terms and approach the Lough on the basis that we want to do no harm. So the solutions to Lough aren't particularly expensive. It's a complex issue, but the solutions are quite simple. And to me, it's the incontrovertible fact that it's the people around Lough, the people who listen to Lough, who are the experts and who have the wisdom. They are the experts that sustain Lough, and they know in the future that Lough shall sustain them. So we're way past being fooled. Those who sit around the table, the powerful, are actually afraid of you now. I know it doesn't feel like it, but they are afraid of you now. They're afraid about their reputations, as I mentioned earlier, being damaged. They're afraid that more and more people are going to come to the streets. They're afraid that the campaigners are going to become even more strategic than they already are. And I think one day soon, they will have their reckoning. They will have their comeuppance. They will be held to account. And I think if we listen to Lough very soon, if we're guided by the spirit of Lough, as Leigh says, that we will be the resurgence, not just to save Lough, but to save everything else of value in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, and well said. Next we have Maeve O'Neill from People for Profit. Thank you, Maeve.
Thanks, Paddy, and thanks everybody for coming. We're here after seeing the absolutely apocalyptic scenes over the last week in Lough, and it's really important we're here. It doesn't matter that we're small, because people are paying attention and people are watching. We have to ask ourselves, how have we got to this point? The science has been laid out very well by all the previous speakers, and there's been people here sounding the alarm, not just for the last 3 years where we've seen the algae blooms, but people have been sounding the alarm about the environmental harm being caused in Lough for decades. And I just want to pay tribute to those activists who have been relentless and incredible at doing so. The last 3 years, obviously, Lough has got the attention that it deserves. The crisis that exists in Lough from our government, even being included within the programme for government. But no real action has been taken. It's all words, it's all meetings, it's all words on paper. It's been the promises to fix Lough have been more blah blah blah, in the words of Greta Thunberg. And we're seeing this globally in the face of the climate crisis. Unfortunately, this is not just Lough. This is what's happening globally with the climate crisis. And world leaders are saying the right things, but they're doing nothing. And this is an absolute betrayal for present and for future generations. We know what is needed in Lough. We need immediate and drastic action to save a Lough. We need action that we've never ever seen before on the environment. As James has said many times, an immediate moratorium on all pollution that's going into the Lough. But why this hasn't happened, we know the science, we know what needs to happen, but why it hasn't happened is because our government normally operates, it'll go against how it normally operates in terms of business as usual. Because the crisis in Lough, it epitomises the toxic and abysmal politics that we have here. Because worse than doing nothing to protect our most important ecosystems, our government is actually coordinatedly and consciously colluded with corporations and polluters to break environmental law that has led to the near death of Lough. What they're doing is they're agreeing loopholes to let corporate polluters keep on polluting to profit from the climate destruction. We're being lied to, hand over foot. They will make superficial changes, but the business of exploitation of people and nature by elites will continue. And there's no doubt we have a bad year, and we have some of the worst examples of environmental destruction, not just with Lough, with my boy dump down in Derry, where I'm from, and also the environmental harm that could be caused with the gold mining and the sparings. Those are just some examples of shocking practices that are happening to our environment here. But this is happening worldwide, and it's not because every government is depressed and is dormant, but it's because of the capitalist economic system, which is at war with our planetary systems and human systems. And this is not a question of resource. James has outlined how it's not even going to cost a lot of money to take the action that's needed. And there's always money if money was needed for war. But this is a question of political will. And it's not going to happen. We can't just leave it to them to make this change. This change comes from each and every one of us standing here. When we go home, talking to people in our workplaces, in our neighbourhoods, in our schools, it's going to come from ordinary people campaigning for and fashioning new solutions. We cannot relent in our campaign, no matter how hopeless things might feel, because any change that's ever happened that's actually been positive for ordinary people has always come from the bottom up, from people power. And this is why we need to work in solidarity with other campaigns, across campaigns, and not just environmental ones, but all struggles against injustice and against corporate greed. It's the same political actors that bow to corporate greed, that don't build enough houses, that profiteer over privatisation in our NHS, and then they turn around to us and tell us we need to blame our neighbours, blame migrants or the most vulnerable in society for their failures. We need to always stand together and punch up and never punch down. So Lough changes everything. If we can change, if we can save Lough, then we have a fighting chance at everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Maeve. And finally, we have Mal from the Green Party. Thank you, Mal.
Thank you, Paddy. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Look, I think Lough and the algae bloom is symptomatic of 27 years of systemic failure from our local politicians, and that's the 5 executive parties. I often say that their environmental policy is like plastic grass. It only looks like the real thing from a distance, but the minute you get up close, you realise it's actually detrimental to the environment and to our health and well-being. So that's maybe a personal dislike of plastic grass, but I'm proud to say that the Greens, 12 years ago, when the executive parties were bringing forward the idea of the Going for Growth strategy, a strategy which incentivised industrial slaughterhouse farming and moved away from traditional small-scale or family farm holdings, instead moving towards that factory farming. We warned that was going to have huge detrimental impact on our water quality, our air quality, our soil quality, and of course on our rural and Lough communities. Lo and behold, 10 years later, their factory farm chickens have literally come home to roost. And we see it with the blue-green algae here. We also warned in 2020, extractive sand dredging would only make things worse, but yet the 5 executive parties pushed that through, and we heard from James about the long-term lease and had the challenge we're going to have to end sand dredging in the Lough. Now, over the last number of years, the executive parties have talked about their commitment to the environment. They've put in their programme for government that they're committed to addressing Lough, but we know it's not having the impact that we wanted. It is not turning the curve to save Lough at the pace that we want. And I think James and other speakers today have clearly articulated that it is nothing more than greenwashing. They don't care. They don't want to see it restored. They want to prioritise the profits and their big backers in big agri-food. Now, I want to pay tribute to campaigners here. The Lough, Save Lough campaign groups, sea swimmers, local fishermen, eel fishermen, people who walk in communities around the Lough. You are standing up, and it may be hard and it is disheartening, but it is always good things are difficult to do, and this is a good thing and it is difficult to do, but keep your shoulder to the wheel. What we need in terms of policy solutions or an immediate moratorium on slurry discharge around the Lough. That's how we stop more phosphorus going into the water, with an immediate moratorium. We then need to invest in wastewater infrastructure. 20 odd years ago, when I first came back from England, I was campaigning supporting the Women's Coalition when we were talking about drinking water infrastructure in Northern Ireland. 20 years later, the executive have put their fingers in the air and done very little to address it. And that exacerbates the phosphorus runoff in the Lough and then the disastrous blue-green algae. We know that fines are not good enough for those who are committing environmental crimes. We know that the previous minister reduced those fines, and the new minister has not reinstated them to historic levels. What is a slap on the wrist when you're making huge profits from polluting our environment? That is what we have to change. It must cost you, and it must act as a detriment to business who are polluting our environment. We need an independent environmental protection agency. That was promised. Remember that agreement? New decade, new approach, promise it's different this time. 2 years later, the Assembly collapsed. But that agreement committed to an independent environmental protection agency. But the most recent programme for government rolled back from that commitment, and there is no intention to establish one. That would be a mechanism that would hold independent business, would hold statutory and government agencies to account. And ultimately, we need to say, mea culpa, they got it wrong, we should not have done going for growth. It has poisoned our water, it has poisoned our soil, and it is poisoning our air, and we need to scrap it and do something else. And that is exemplified. Armagh is the orchard county, but when you go to the supermarket, your apples are from Costa Rica. They are not local, and that is symptomatic of what is wrong with big agri-food. They do whatever is cheapest, whatever maximises their profits, and to hell with the impact it has on our environment. So keep campaigning, as Greens will be standing with you, and know that we keep their feet to the fire, and we will see a sea change in the approach to Lough Neagh and our wider environment. Gormila Mayogat.
Thanks, Niall. So we'll just finish up there, and we just want to reiterate that this is just the start. Please take a leaflet, join our WhatsApp community if you haven't already. Please come up, speak to us at the end. This is going to keep going, and we're not going to stop until we get material change. Thank you. And one last shout out for the March for Lough Neagh at the end of September. There'll be more details coming out for that soon, and I hope to see each and every one of you there. Thank you very much.